Dr. Patricia Grabarek.
And I'm Dr. Katina Sawyer, and welcome to Thriving at Work, a Worker Being podcast.
So I want to start us off today by making a small announcement. We are going to be taking a short break from the podcast over the summer, a little summer vacation, if you will. But it won't be a full vacation for us because we're going to be working on the book and we're super excited. We're getting close to the end of the writing journey. We have to submit the book to our publisher at the end of August. So the next several weeks, we're going to just focus in and really, really work hard on the book. We cannot wait to share our progress and our stories with you when we come back. So we're hoping that our first episode back in early September is going to be a bit of a recap of what happened and where we landed on the book and all the good stuff. And then we'll hopefully have some more updates as to timelines and all the good things from Wiley. And we'll be sharing that in September. In the meantime, follow along with us on social media on LinkedIn. We'll be posting and sharing there as well as in our email list. So go ahead and sign up to our mailing list, which you'll find in the show notes. So you'll get updates about the book throughout this process. And we'll be back with you all shortly.
So today we are going to be talking about work meaningfulness and specifically how people find meaning or not. I don't want to do a spoiler alert in wearing multiple hats or having multiple professional identities, engaging in multiple jobs at once. So you can think of someone who has like a side hustle or somebody who has seasonal work that they might pick up at times. So we'll talk more about that. Before we get into the topic of the day and the details, I am wondering what you find most meaningful about your work.
Well, I find this topic super relevant because obviously we have multiple hats that we wear. So that's kind of fun. I'm excited to hear the findings.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think my answer is going to be the fact that I get to do multiple things. That makes it meaningful because, in one part of my world, I'm working in an organization and I'm really working hard to try to understand the dynamics within the company to help provide recommendations and guidance as to where we should go to improve the employee experience. So that's really, empowering and engaging and hopefully, will lead to some sort of change within organizations to make them better, right? So I like doing that. But obviously I'm very passionate about everything that we do with worker being, and my goals are kind of the same. Like, even though the types of roles are very different, like ultimately I'm super interested in making better work environments for people. And so I get really passionate about like anything that I get to do around that. So that's kind of the cool thing about having the two roles for the time being, because I get to be living it and then I get to be writing about it and doing research with you. And obviously when we talk to our organizations and stuff, like being able to see how people take what we're sharing and our findings from our research. I don't know. I think it's just seeing like what the impact can be and like thinking about that impact is very meaningful to me.
Yeah. I was going to say something very similar. And I think the only thing that I was thinking about that might be like a little bit different from what you just mentioned is there's like a student impact. Like you have more of like in your, day job, you have more of an impact on organizations and how they function. And I have more of a like student related impact. So I was thinking about how nice it is to get like an email from a student or a client to say, you really helped us out. We had such a, great time engaging with you. We feel like this has been such a positive experience, or like I really learned something new that I was able to take with me. So those little like notes are things that, or little like indicators that you've made a difference for somebody, is kind of what keeps you going through the times that maybe feel a little bit more stressful.
Totally. And I love that you have that student side because you are making an impact like from the ground up in a way, right? Because I'm coming in my day-to-day work and working with organizations that are already established and they're already like doing something and trying to help guide in a certain direction. And that's what we're doing when we work with worker being too. But with a student, it's like you are shaping the minds of our future HR leaders that can make a difference, right? Like that's really cool.
Yeah. And, I'm talking to them when they're in college or in MBA programs. You're working in the organization. We have like a little impact sandwich that we're making here. Uh,
Maybe one day I will catch some of those students as they've grown up in the corporate world, right? And like
yeah.
they've been trying to make a difference, and now we can support them as they're actually out there.
True. And once I said sandwich, I realized I'm really hungry. So that also made me like, oh, a sandwich. That actually sounds delightful. Okay, so I want to give our top three takeaways for the article this week. And I'll just preface this by saying this article had a lot of different studies in it. So I'm going to kind of take like a high level view. And I'm going to do the takeaways kind of a little bit as like a cliffhanger to say like it's
Oh,
possible because this is sort of testing two competing ideas. And I think it might be fun to like just give a preview of what those ideas are and then let you know like which one actually turns out.
yeah.
So
Love it.
the first is that when people spend more time enacting multiple professional identities, so the amount of time you spend in a day where you're switching back and forth between different work roles. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're a teacher who on the weekends also works in a restaurant and who in the evening sometimes drives Uber, let's say.
Okay.
Or maybe during the summertime, you have another type of employment. So it's really thinking about people who have these different roles that they engage in simultaneously. And it doesn't need to be all throughout the year that you would do that. But even if you go through a period of time where you're doing that, you would still be relevant for this study. And so the first takeaway is that enacting multiple professional identities has an impact on the extent to which you feel your work is meaningful. So I'll talk about what that impact is in a second.
Okay.
The other is that there are sort of two schools of thought around what type of impact having multiple professional identities might have on your work meaningfulness. One is that it might make you feel disconnected and fragmented and sort of not sure of who you are. And that would have a negative impact on work meaningfulness. And the third takeaway is that there's also a possibility for a positive pathway, which is that it's exciting and enriching and engaging to be going back and forth between these identities. And so that would have a positive impact on work meaningfulness. And there's one more thing that I'll throw in there, which is it matters a little bit how different the work roles are from each other. So I'll leave
Oh,
that there. Yes. So
okay. Well,
those are our takeaways.
I'm very curious to hear about the positive sides of this and the negative, of course, too. But I'm really curious to like see what happened, what came out here. Especially
Yes.
as you're kind of teasing two different ways of I mean, maybe both are true, just depending on the situation. You tell me.
Well, it's a very good thought. But they actually thought that there would be these dual pathway effects that it would both be more stimulating for people and more what they're calling self-alienating. Um, and so the idea is that when you have these multiple job roles, it can do one of two things or both of these things. The first is that, like I said, you might feel really fragmented, like people get a lot of their identity from their work. And so if you really see yourself as a particular work identity, and then you have this other work identity, you might feel inauthentic in that other work identity, or you might feel like you're not sure exactly who you are as a professional because you're pulled in too many directions. And so instead of having like a really strong sense of self on the job, one possibility is that you kind of never quite feel like yourself because you have too many selves and they're sort of competing. And so you end up with this feeling of self alienation. Like, I don't think I know who I am very well. I'm confused about who I am as a person. And so, from an identity perspective, one possibility is that this is just overwhelming. I don't know how to define myself anymore because there's too many definitions and now I'm confused.
That's interesting. I don't know. I mean, maybe it pans out that way, but to me, it feels like if you've got these multiple identities, in some way you might know yourself a little bit better because you know yourself in a broader way than when you're just kind of siloed into one thing. But that's my just like random thought.
Yeah. And that goes along a little bit with the second kind of idea here, which is there's another set of theories. So, what I just discussed is sort of this idea of self inconsistency. Like, the more inconsistent I am across domains, the more I feel like I don't know who I am. I'm not sure what I stand for or, what type of employee people see me as or I feel validated as. So I just get confused. The other option is this idea of instead of self inconsistency, that people might have a feeling of self expansion. And self expansion gives you a broader sense of yourself and a feeling that you're developing new ways of doing things, new perspectives into your self conception. And that can be exciting because we know as human beings, we like the idea that we're continuously improving, we're getting better, we're doing things, more effectively, we're learning new skills. So by doing these multiple job roles at once, another option is that it expands your self conception by basically making you feel better about yourself and your skills and what you can do, which then should provoke this like stimulating feeling, this like intrinsic satisfaction. This is exciting. I'm growing. I'm learning. This is a new experience. I'm getting better. And so I find my work more meaningful because this is helping me to become a more well rounded and better person.
I feel like that makes so much sense to me, but
Yeah.
that the yeah, like it kind of aligns with what I just said about the broad thing, right? Like you're now seeing yourself in a broader way. You're doing more things, different things, learning. I think that's such a big one. Like we know people get a lot of meaning if they feel like they're growing and continuously learning. It's not like, you don't have to necessarily have promotions all the time or something like that to feel like you're having meaning in what you're doing, but you need to feel like you're expanding who you are. So if it feels like if you have multiple roles that would align with this theory that they're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. So they kind of thought that they set out to say here that it's possible that both could happen at once, right? Like I might feel a little bit confused about who I am, but I also might be a little bit excited. So, like, I could imagine, you go to a cocktail party and people are like, tell me what you do for work. And you could have this moment of like existential crisis of how do I explain myself to people because I have all these different hats and it makes me feel like I'm not consistent or coherent. And I have this like moment of like, who am I? How do I explain this to people? Right. And then you might actually start engaging in these different types of jobs. And as you're doing them, you're like, wow, this is exciting. I'm learning new things. And so there may be moments of self alienation and moments of stimulation that you're getting from it. And that's initially what they thought was going to happen, was that there was going to be sort of a light and a dark side of having these multiple identities.
Mm-hmm.
But really, what they found was support for what made sense to you. The idea that when you wear these multiple hats, it seems like more often than not, the outcome of that is that you feel this sense of excitement and novelty and growth. And that leads you to feel like your work is more meaningful, which I can talk a little bit about what they mean by meaning as well. But that's the pathway that really consistently worked across the studies that they conducted.
That's really cool. So, I mean, it basically is an argument for, in favor of having multiple roles if you're able to. Obviously, there's like a million reasons why that could be hard too, but it seems like if you have multiple roles and are doing multiple things, you're going to feel more meaning in what you're doing. And I would assume, and maybe this is something we talk about at the end, like companies would benefit. 'Cause I know there's always like large companies that are concerned about like the gig economy and people doing other things. And I know we had another article at one point that talked about like it being a good thing, that if people have these separate roles outside of work. And it sounds like that's probably the same here, that if they're finding more meaning, then they're probably going to be finding more meaning with your company too, and that leads to so many positive things as well. So it's kind of like an argument for, if you're thinking about taking on a separate role, like go for it. It's probably going to be
Yeah.
good. But also if you're a leader or, running a company and people are doing that, like don't be upset or scared of it either.
Yeah, that's exactly one of the practical takeaways from this article that they listed was, if you limit people from being able to develop other skills through other forms of work outside of the work opportunities that you provide them, you may be limiting their ability to feel like they're able as people, like holistically to have purpose and meaning in their work, is meaningful to them. And so we know from other literature that feeling work is meaningful helps people to be engaged and helps them to perform better. And so that's basically the argument they're making here too, is that if I can increase my work meaningfulness, then I'll have a positive impact for the company. And that can happen by me engaging in things outside of this job, even if it's another form of paid employment, right? That help me to feel like I'm overall making a bigger impact than I would otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a
And
lot of sense.
that's sort of the definition of work meaningfulness that I was going to get into as well, which is really about feeling like you have work that matters, that you're serving a greater purpose. And so you can imagine that when you're really excited and you feel like you're growing novel skills and you're developing, you're like, oh, like I'm connected to my work in a different way. Like this is serving me as a human being and connecting me to myself in new ways. And so I see the purpose of my work because I recognize that it's helping me get better. And, what they didn't find support for was this idea that, well, this work is all disjointed. I don't know how it relates to me as a person. It's making me feel more confused and disconnected. So, you know, I just don't see the point, right? Like this seems pointless or it seems distracting. That's not what ends up happening. What ends up happening is this idea that people feel more connected to themselves, and that leads them to feel like, oh, I'm fulfilling my purpose through this work. I'm getting to be a better human.
I love that. I think the definition of meaning is really helpful too. So like people can think about like what that means to them and like how does that play out in your specific situation. But I'm always happy when you share findings like this, where it's like, not, what's the word I'm looking for? I think I've just heard too many stories about people getting dinged or other people getting mad when someone has a gig job.
Yeah.
That like, hearing about this positive impact like makes me feel really happy for people that do it. And, unfortunately we live in a world where sometimes you're not paid well enough either. So it's kind of like, it's annoying to me that companies might try to limit people's work outside of their jobs within that setting, because not only are there a lot of benefits like we are seeing here, but some people need the extra cash too. So like it's nice to think about these like potential benefits. Like I think about all the Uber drivers. Like when I go to Northern California, like so many of the Uber drivers up there are people that have full-time jobs in tech and are also Uber drivers, and have fun conversations with them, and a lot of them seem super engaged in the work that they're doing as drivers. And so it's kind of fun to think that these people are experiencing some extra meaning because they're doing this job.
Yeah. And something that I think is interesting about this study that you just alluded to is that they also measured the amount of identity contrast that the different jobs have. So, like, how different are they? So, I would say for us, we have pretty low identity contrast because our jobs, our day jobs and worker being are content wise pretty related, and the expertise that we use is pretty similar. But in the instance of a tech worker or a tech employee who drives Uber, those are really different, right? Like different skill
Yeah.
sets, different sorts of things. What they actually found is that there's more positive effects the more discrepant the
Oh.
roles are. So if you think about like why they think that people find this stimulating and why they find it meaningful, it's really about this idea of like, I'm getting better at new things and
Mm-hmm.
I'm growing and improving. And so while you can do that outside of your day job in a job that's similar, it might not feel as novel and new and exciting as something that's like completely different. So that's
Hmm.
kind of interesting. The more different it is, the better the impact is.
That is really interesting. And I feel like for us, like, we're writing a book, right? That is something that's different. Well, you write a lot in your job. You're right. So ours isn't that different. But I'm thinking about my friend Caitlin. You've met Caitlin. So
Yeah.
she has a jewelry business. Shout out to Boy Shuri if anybody's interested in some
Yay.
great jewelry. So she makes jewelry, but then full time she's like a finance accounting type person, which is so funny. Like she loves to do taxes. Like what a weirdo.
That's funny.
Um, but then also makes is like super creative and makes beautiful jewelry. But those two things are so different.
Yeah.
And she likes both of them, and I think she finds meaning in both. So I'm just thinking about her as like a perfect example here. Like she's somebody that is doing two very disparate jobs, um, and growing and changing and evolving in those two different realms, which kind of makes her like a unique and maybe more whole person in some way.
Yeah. Yeah. And it might be that, I don't know, this is not in the paper, but I could imagine that when you do something totally different, it might also give your brain like a break from the other things so that when you go back to the other thing, you're more like engaged in it because you're like doing something totally using a different part of your skill set and not like continuing to hammer on that same skill set. So it's like, it could also have like a replenishing effect, almost like a how we've talked about before, like mastery when you're
Mm.
trying to recover, where you're getting good at something you really care about, like, but it's not related to your work. It might have some similar impacts to that, where it's like I'm improving on something else that's not work related that helps me recover from what I spend more time doing.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, I mean, someone needs to test it out, but there probably is some of that component, that like mastery piece to it, right? So, yeah, you're getting paid for it, so it's a job, but you're doing something different. You're learning something new from the other jobs. So they probably do replenish each other a little bit as well. That's a good thought, and I'd be curious to see if someone studies that, what that looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. And so, those are really the high level takeaways here about multiple job holders. And going back to what you talked about before, like, what are some of the things people can do with this information? The first is that employers should not be defensive toward their employees engaging in these outside activities and thinking of it as a conflict that's going to decrease their performance. It's a reminder, I think, that this is something that people should be aware of as uplifting and meaningful potentially for people, as opposed to just thinking of it as this distraction that's keeping them from being dedicated to you and you alone as their employer.
Agreed. Yeah, I think that's a great practical takeaway. So leaders, listen up and don't get weird if someone has a side job, and make it okay. Like there's also, I think, a component where I've heard about people that like have these side jobs and like never talk about it at work, and
Yeah.
I feel like that is hard too. Like if we talk about like authenticity and um, how important it is to be authentic in the workplace, right? I feel like if you have to hide a second job because the employer, your leader, is weird about it, then that means you're less authentic at work too, which isn't great. So I think there's like so many things, so many reasons why, and obviously the meeting piece here is one of them, why employers need to just like get over it. Like you aren't in a monogamous relationship. Like your employee can do something else. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And if they're and there's no difference if they're doing stuff outside of work that they're getting paid for or not getting paid for. Like all of these things can contribute to your sense of self and as a human being. And so whether they're getting paid for it or not, if you're not mad at them for doing activities outside of work, which we know some workplaces might be, but if you think of it just as something that they're engaging in their off work time that they're happening to get paid for, and you think about the positive benefits of them having hobbies or having activities that they like to engage in or people they like to hang out with, this is possible, or it's possible for this to give people a similar sense of upliftingness and connection to themselves, and for people who are thinking of taking on multiple job roles, I think that a lot of times people would imagine that that's just uniformly pretty stressful. And this is highlighting a potential silver lining to juggling these multiple roles, is that you might end up actually feeling like what you're doing has more meaning overall.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really nice little benefit there. And hopefully, like, I think there is a difference if you're having to do a second job to make ends meet. Like, that adds like a whole other layer of stress, right? But if you're in a situation where it's like a passion project or something else that you're interested in, you're able to make money off of it. Like, yeah, I think it's good to think about this layer of meaning that might come into your life from that. So I love that from the individual perspective. And I also love us telling bosses and companies to stop caring if people are doing side gig work. It's kind of like anything else, right? You have certain expectations. As long as they're reasonable expectations in the workplace, people need to meet them. If they meet those expectations and performing fine, why can't they do other things outside of work? They should be able to. You should be supportive of that, encouraging that, and letting people live their lives, whatever that means for them. So I think it's just a good reminder to like back off on the side gig thing and be cool and supportive.
Yeah. Don't be scared if you're an employee or an employer to allow
Exactly.
people to, or to take on multiple job roles. It could make you think you have more, feel more purpose or connectedness to yourself in your life. So, be
Love it.
like us at Worker Being and have some multiple job roles, I guess. But yeah, that's all I have. Hopefully this was helpful for thinking through, if anybody out there is considering taking on another job role, maybe this is a good push in that direction. And also, it could be helpful to embody a mindset where you're thinking of it as this like novel way of expanding skills too, and remind yourself when that's happening to make sure you're getting as much of those positive benefits as possible.
Yep, I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing. It was a great article, a fun one for us to end on before our little summer break.
Yes.
Which again, ironically, is because we have multiple job roles and we need
Yes.
to take a little time writing the book. So we're super excited about everything book related. We're having a lot of fun with it. We cannot wait to share it with you. We cannot wait for it to be published and for you all to read it. So bear with us over the next few weeks as we are super heads down and writing away. And we'll be back soon, early September, to share all the good news and fun insights of what happened and our book journey. And we will talk then. Thanks for listening. Thriving at Work, a Worker Being podcast, is hosted by us, Dr. Patricia Grabarek and Dr. Katina Sawyer, and produced by Allie Johnson.